Greetings, gentle audio listeners. For the 63rd time, we're in Lesbian Talk.
Lesbians. I got nothing.
We get a badass theme tune, and you know it.
We do. It's very metal. And an honorary lesbian actually composed that just for us.
Yeah,
Harry Madryan. I think I'm saying his name right.
Hmm?
It's Harry Madryan, I think? Margarine?
Honestly, I've never heard it spoken, so I don't want to insult the guy by saying it wrong. So I'm going to assume his name is pronounced Barney.
He's so metal, and he wrote our theme song. And you can find his name in our credits, like with so many other people who have helped out in the show, so. Now you know. Knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joe. Pretty much. So how have you been in the past bit?
Well, you know, the person who threatened to throw acid in my face has not managed it yet, so therefore they are a failure, and they are an ongoing failure. Apart from that, fine.
You were attracting the ire of the world this week.
Yeah, I don't, you know, it's like, I don't mind if they get upset at me for doing things I do, but it's like, for no reason at all. I guess if you get off on that, that's okay.
No one's threatened me for a while, so. But I'm sure, I work retail, so I'm sure it's only a few days away. It's true. People will threaten other people's lives over retail. Like when I worked in insurance, my life was being threatened all the time. It wasn't ever credible because I didn't know where the call center was, but you know. Yeah,
life threatens. It's just like, really, why? I suppose maybe I don't threaten people's lives. Maybe it's because it's a Northern Irish thing, because if people threaten lives, then they usually mean it.
Yeah, that's true. But people still must be obnoxious in shops, though. I'm sure you've seen entitled obnoxious behavior in shops.
Oh, definitely. I've seen a hell of a lot of that, but it doesn't usually result in people impotently yelling that they're going to kill someone else. Because it's like, yeah, that sort of stuff does happen, so we'll not mention it, you know?
Well, see, in America, everybody's armed, so they could literally mean, I'm about to go out into the car to get my gun, hold on a second. And you guys aren't armed as much.
Yeah, the ones who are armed over here tend to be people who are in, illegal organizations.
Oh, well. So in other news, we are actually about less than an hour away from the U.S. playing Belgium in the group of 16, and I have to confess, I do not believe that we will win.
Of course, by the time you listen to this result will be already there. Woo!
I'm really happy that we got past the group stage. That made me feel really good. We're in this too. Rest of the world. But I don't think we're going to beat Belgium. They're really good, so.
I would be surprised if you did. However, I think that it's possible because, there's been a lot of upsets and craziness.
Well, technically anything's possible. All a team needs is to have an off day and the other team wins.
Well, this is true, but it's not like San Marino versus Brazil and San Marino managed to win. It's Belgium and America. Belgium are a better team, but you guys are closer together than other teams might, maybe.
Yeah, it's possible, so we'll have to see about that.
Plus, my nephew, my eldest nephew, who turned up in my Boy Meets Girl review, whenever he was over last, I was talking to him about the World Cup, and he was convinced, for some reason, that Belgium were going to win. So I basically kept laughing at him and saying things like, are you sure you don't mean Brazil? And he was like, no, I mean Belgium. They have a good team this year. And I was like, yeah, but Belgium are only moderately good on the best of days. So having a good team for a moderately good team, that just means you're better than average.
Watch him totally be right.
But he was sure Belgium were going to win the World Cup. So I told him finally, if Belgium win the World Cup, I will buy him a video game.
Oh, that's nice of you.
So however, after he and I made this agreement, then I pointed out that I just said I would buy him a video game. I did not say what video game I would buy him.
Oh, you're going to buy him something really bad, aren't you?
No, I'm not going to have to buy him anything because Belgium are not going to win.
Oh, I'm just saying. Speaking of my niece and nephews, do you know, I was at Wegmans the other day, and they had sacks of assorted saltwater taffy flavors.
They liked that whenever they had some.
Oh, did they have some already? I couldn't remember if I'd sent some.
I'd been given some ages ago by you, and so I had some left over when they came, so I gave them some.
Oh, well, this is going to be now. It was a pre-made sack of them, so it's going to be 2 of each flavor instead of 3. But they configured that part out themselves, right?
Yeah, that'd be no problem.
All right, so I'll send that next time I'm...
But whenever you're over here, you never know. You could be all like, hey, I'm American. He's like, your country knocked Belgium out of the World Cup and therefore robbed me of the chance of getting a video game. I will destroy you.
I'll be like, dude, I'll bring you sweets. Shut up.
Okay.
So, a lot's been going on in the country. In fact, just today, a federal court in Kentucky did overturn their state marriage ban. However, it's been stayed because, of course, they're waiting for the decision from the circuit court. And the Supreme Court have been in the news because they closed out their term with some pretty fucking lousy decisions, if you want my opinion.
Supreme Court's not one of the American politics areas I'm massively aware of, but I've heard lots of people claiming that what with the demographic shifts in America and everything, the chances are that in the upcoming 20 years or so, the country is going to be, the right-wing drift is going to have to come back at some point. The reason that there are so many right-wingers in this court is because you had Reagan, you had Bush Sr., you had Bush Jr. They together, they managed to get like 5 slots on the court. Basically, because it's so difficult for Republicans to get into power now and on the presidential level because they're all fucking insane, so it looks like from the next like ages, it's going to be like more liberal people, Democratic presidents putting liberals in the court. So it's suggested that the Roberts Court is going to be possibly the most reversed court in history.
Hopefully. Well, here's the thing. I mean, about the Hobby Lobby decision. And if you're not an American and you've been seeing those words being bandied about on social media and you have no idea what's going on, Hobby Lobby is a company that sells craft supplies, cheap craft supplies from China. And basically, are they evangelical Christian or are they Catholic?
I think they're Catholic because
okay.
I've heard them refer to their shops as chapels.
Okay. So they're owned by a Catholic family. And because of the Affordable Care Act, it's really hard to explain. Like, I've talked to a lot of Europeans about this, and they've been kind of confused. But in America, if you don't have, like, any kind of federal program, like Medicare or Medicaid or something like that, then your insurance is partially, well, usually, it used to be this way, partially paid for by your employer. So this means that your employer is tangentially involved in your care and treatment. When I worked for a large healthcare company, I worked for a medical review company, and a lot of the clients, a lot of the plans, which were run by the employer, had the option to set what criteria we could use to evaluate cases. A big example of this was experimental treatments. If the company doesn't want to pay for it, they'll say, oh, well, we don't accept experimental stuff, we won't pay for that. Gastric bypass surgeries, Roux-en-Y and lap band and all those kind of procedures became really popular at that time, and a lot of employers didn't want to pay for it, so they made the hoops that you had to jump through to get this certified incredibly difficult. And it made life miserable for a lot of patients that we had to deal with. When we had to say, I'm sorry, but your employer specifies we have to review by these guidelines, I'm sorry. So a lot of Europeans, especially people in the Guardian comment section, don't even understand why your employer is involved with your healthcare to begin with, but it's because your employer, at least partially, is paying for this plan. So Hobby Lobby have decided, since they're Catholic and they don't want women to be running around having all that sex and stuff like that, they're not going to pay for birth control or long-term contraceptives like IUDs or any kind of emergency contraception like the morning after pill. And some of the people that work for them said, well, that's not fair. You can't decide that. And they said, well, yes, but see, you're going against our morals, so yes, we can. And it finally came to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, well, they really believe this, so you have to let it be. Freedom of religion, which is really stupid.
This is one of the reasons why your employer should not be involved in your medical.
This is very true.
This is a wonderful argument for why single payer is better.
For example, if you have mental health benefits that you have to access, your employer could find that out, and technically your employer could fire you. Now, you'd have a pretty good case for a civil suit about it, but you've already lost your job. That's why a lot of companies tried to do this. They try to pull a lot of these programs like, oh, well, this is about total health awareness. and you're fat, so you have to go to this class, and you have to stop smoking, you over there, and you have to do this because you're diabetic, and we think that's your fault. So a lot of people have found themselves bullied in the workplace because their employer believes they're paying too much for their health.
It's absolutely fucking insane. And, okay, you know what's hilarious about this, the Hobby Lobby ruling? It's not hilarious. It's very darkly hilarious.
What, the fact that their pension fund goes to pay for contraceptives? Like, it goes to contraceptive companies?
It also goes to abortion companies.
Ooh, I didn't hear that on social media.
Yeah, from what I've read, Hobby Lobby makes money out of abortions.
Oh, but Viagra and vasectomies and all that kind of stuff for men, of course. Of course.
And some of the things that they've banned aren't actually, they don't actually do anything to do with actual fetuses. Some of these things block the pregnancy from happening at all, but Hobby Lobby said, we believe that this is still a type of an abortion, and the Supreme Court, one of the parts of the decision, if I remember correctly, basically said, we can't tell them that their belief is wrong. It doesn't matter how scientifically accurate it is. And it's like, they're literally putting a corporation as a person whose religious beliefs trump reality, and therefore that negatively impacts other people, and that's legal. America is fucking insane.
We are. Like, I read this decision. Okay, I read the abridged version on SCOTUS blog, but just the more that happens in this country, the more I'm so glad that I'm soon not going to be in it. Because, you know, I read, okay, so The Guardian is not the best example of foreign media, but I have a lot of friends that I follow on social media who are from other countries, and to see other countries' perspectives on us, it's quite frankly very embarrassing.
Well, every country has stuff to be embarrassed of, different degrees, different things, but...
I know, you guys have that whole terrorism thing you're getting over, so...
Yeah, we're surviving that. Plus, it turns out absolutely everyone involved in entertainment in the 60s and 70s in the UK was molesting people.
I know, because the Rolf Harris decision got handed down, and so he's going to go to jail for, like, ever, right?
I have no idea, but... Because he's... Max Clifford got done for, 8 or so cases. Rolf Harris is done for 12. I don't know, maybe because it was so long ago that it doesn't count, the amount in jail will be smaller. I have no idea. But because none of the news today seem to comment that they're expecting a really long jail sentence. And as far as I know, he's out of jail right now until the sentencing on the 4th. So if he is expecting a long jail sentence, honestly, he's 84. If I was in his position, I'd kill myself.
Yeah.
It would be better to live free and then die before going to jail forever whenever you're 84. But I don't know. I have no idea what he's going to get.
It's
Max Clifford had slightly less, things sort of being found guilty of, and he's in jail for 18 months. So
that's it.
Yeah, I can only assume that there might be some of these cases might be treated less harshly because of the age of the person, or because it took so long ago, or something. There's probably all these factors.
That after all the Jimmy Savile stuff came out, the judges would really want to show that, okay, we really screwed the pooch before, but this time we're going to get it right.
Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's stricter guidelines about what you can do. Maybe there's mitigating circumstances. I have no idea. I haven't paid that much attention to it.
See, but then, do you guys have something that's like the Supreme Court? Is there the Queen's best court or something?
Well, in the UK, until 3 or 4 years ago, the top court in the UK was actually the House of Parliament.
Could you be tried by the House of Parliament? Or would it have to be something really serious, like treason?
You could do an appeal, which I believe would go to, and then eventually it would be voted on in the House of Parliament. If only if they accepted it. It didn't happen often, but they actually set up a UK Supreme Court. The government that's in right now did. I really wish they'd chosen a different title for it, because it's just so fucking American.
But so, would something like this happen in the UK these days? Because you guys are totally very secular now, aren't you?
The contraceptive thing?
Yeah.
Fuck no. Remember in the UK, a couple of, last week or so, they completely outlawed the teaching of creationism in schools.
Oh yeah, that's right, I did read that.
And there was some private academies which received some public money, and they were giving they were teaching some, creationism, and the government finally banned it outright. And that's a conservative government.
See, that would never happen in the U.S. People would go bugfuck.
The UK is incredibly secular, although America's actually getting more and more secular. It's quite interesting to see the numbers change. Like America, the amount of people in America who don't identify as any religion has gone up by about 50% in the last 20 years.
That's true, and I read somewhere that that's likely because of the bad reputation that religion's been giving itself in the U.S.
Plus, I would say it has something to do with the internet. Previously, people would just have to go on with whoever that was in their social circle, talk to them. People on the internet, you get exposed to minority views.
That's true.
So you can have a fracturing of consensus.
One of the things that bothers me a lot about this ruling, and I've been thinking about for a while, now I'm going to take this with a grain of salt, because this is a Facebook infographic that I saw that actually Gomer shared. But this guy, Eric Erickson, I have no idea who he is.
I believe that's a right-wing media person.
Oh, that makes sense. Why would his parents name him Eric if his last name was already Erickson, but whatever.
There's an English... he's retired now, but he was a footballer. They had Phil Neville and Gary Neville. They were footballers. Their dad was called Neville Neville.
That's upsetting. But so anyway, Eric Erickson has said, "My religion trumps your quote-unquote right to employer-subsidized consequence-free sex." And I think that's the heart of the problem, and I think that's been the heart of the problem ever since the dawn of contraception, is the conservative view that sex is something you should never, never, never do, or only in certain circumstances. And if you do, and it's not in those circumstances, you deserve to be punished. You deserve to have a child, and then you deserve no food stamps, you deserve no help, you deserve no aid. You can't abort it now. You can't abort it because that would be murder. But once that child is born, no health care for them, it is all on you because you are a woman who dared to have sex and on her own terms. And that pisses me off so much.
That guy has absolutely no idea that birth control is used for other things than after having casual sex.
Exactly. Now, there was someone that I used to date, and they took birth control. And I said, you're paying attention in health class, right? You know that we don't need that. And they said, well, yeah, but I take it for two reasons. One, otherwise cramps would put me in the hospital every month. And two, because it helps my skin so amazingly. I used to have to take this one medication that made my face rot off, but this has actually helped. A lot of people are helped by birth control for things other than the prevention of conception.
And plus, if he's opposed to people having carefree casual sex, then why is he not complaining about Viagra being on self-care plans?
Exactly. It's just
vasectomies. Those, guys with vasectomies, they can't have children.
This is very true. And actually, I'm on a child-free forum where a lot of guys will share so I had my vasectomy post. Because they're like, this is great. My partner and I don't want children, so I got a vasectomy, so now we can have all the sex we want. No problems there. And I think that's great. If you want to get a vasectomy, go for it. If a girl wants to get her tubes tied, go for it, But it's just this idea that someone can say, I personally think that's wrong, so I can prevent you from doing it. I mean,
it's complete bullshit.
There are things that are wrong. Murder is a good example. There are people, most law enforcement, that will try to prevent you from murdering someone because it is against the law. But having sex whenever you feel like it, as much as conservatives would like it to be, is not against the law. That's where more people come from.
And there's going to be someone out there who's wondering why we give a shit about this, given that we're not likely to be impacted by it. Apart from the healthcare issue thing, it's that people are being unjustly damaged, and just because we're not personally affected by it does not mean that we have no empathy.
Exactly. I know a lot of girls that take birth control. And again, not all of them because they would like to prevent contraception, but guess what? It's not farm times anymore. We have iPods now.
And if you limit your empathy and your interest in a subject to things that directly affect you, then you are not being a good person. You're being an ass.
Now, it's unfair of you to lie to our viewers because of that secret abortion you got that time that Lupa knocked you up.
Well, this is true. Although it was also stated that I was fictional and the baby was a robot.
That's true. But so anyway, enough about the Supreme Court before I rage quit the internet.
Plus, we both have a real interest in people's bodily autonomy.
Yeah. Your body, your rights. It should not be anyone else's decision.
People's right to health care. America is culturally fucked up in several areas, including the idea of healthcare not being a right and the idea of guns being a right. I'm sorry, this whole thing is literally foreign to me.
Well, it's that very American ideal of you should pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Only the very strong people will succeed, and if you don't succeed, it's your own fault for not trying hard enough. And
the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You know the origin of that do you know the origin of that saying?
It's Victorian, isn't it? Or it's like Nelson.
It was actually a parody, because the point was that you cannot pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's physically impossible. They were parodying social conservatism.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's like the term "shutting fire in a crowded theater." That started off as that saying began in World War I as a way to okay the destruction of other groups as free speech. People started yelling in World War I about how we shouldn't be at war with Germany. So people started saying it's like they're shouting fire in a crowded theater. We wouldn't allow that. These people are doing the same sort of thing. Therefore, get rid of their freedom of speech. The idea that pulling up by the bootstraps is one of these.
I always wondered about that, because I thought to myself, if it was a crowded theater and if fire broke out, then the fire alarm would go off, which would essentially cry fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah, it was basically a way to justify the damaging of unpopular speech. And now it's a term that is its meaning has completely shifted. But they like the pulling up the bootstraps. It started off as pretty much opposite what it's used for now.
Well, there's a lot of people that still believe that the only way you get anything is if you want it hard enough. That,
those people have read The Secret.
Psh. That's such bullshit.
Yeah.
I hate that the whole entire section in New Age of, the law of attraction, and then, if you go to bed and think really hard about it, you won't need glasses in a few weeks. That's really stupid.
The law of attraction, which is, that's great physics, that is.
But yeah, so I work at a bookstore. Would you like to hear about it?
I would. Although, I like to say that in the UK, the shit that happened with Hobby Lobby would not happen. However, if Northern Ireland was an independent country, possibly.
'Cause shit's fucked for you, yo.
Well, luckily Northern Ireland is sort of kept on a short leash. Psh. Not short enough.
But so, anyway, if this is the first time that you're listening... Actually, you know what? I should go back and count the amount of times I use the phrase, but so anyway, as a transition.
About 750,521.
3 times an episode. So if you're just listening, if this is the very first time you've heard Lesbian Talk, first of all, welcome. Second of all, this is one time at the store. Now, I have worked for a large chain bookstore for over a decade now. I've been there, I've done that, I've seen and said it all, and this is a story of one of those times. So, don't know if I've ever talked about it before, but occasionally you have to lie to customers. Not often, and not unscrupulously, just sometimes it has to happen. And this is a story of a few of those times. Now, this was working back in the children's department, and there was this really sweet old lady. Like, she looked like she had been sent by Central Casting to the store. She was such a sweet old lady. She comes and she goes, "Oh, excuse me, dear, I need to buy some books for my granddaughter, and I don't know any books these days. What are some good books for my children?" And I was like, "Oh, well, ma'am, there's this book, and I always loved this book." And so, she was shopping, I think, for a granddaughter, a grandson, and a great-nephew. And so I was helping her pick out some books, and she's like, "Oh, this looks good. Oh, yes, I will try. Oh, that's so adorable." So while I was helping her, this other lady came up, and she was all awful. And she's like, "Excuse me, I need things and stuff." And I was like, "Ma'am, I'm with a customer right now." Because she basically interrupted me. And the sweet little lady goes, "Oh, no, dear, you go and help her out. You've been so helpful. I'm going to sit over here and look over some of these, and I'll decide which ones I want to buy." And I was like, "Okay, ma'am, how can I help you?" And someone's like, "I need this one book." And I was like, "Well, I've never heard of it, so let's look it up on the computer." So we have, computers that our customers can use to search in some stores. But most of the time it's better to just have us look it up. So I go over to the desk, and I go to look it up, and she immediately comes behind me and looks over my shoulder, and it's just a pet peeve of mine. I really can't stand when people read the system over my shoulder, because they don't know how to interpret the information, and they're always like, "But the computer says it's there." I say, "Yes, the computer says that this book exists in our system, however, it's not in our store." "But the computer said..." No. So it's one of those things where a little knowledge sometimes is too much for people. So I said to her, "Oh, ma'am, if you don't mind coming around to the front of the counter, please." And I say that to so many people, so many times a day when I work in kids. And usually they're like, oh, okay, and they come around. And she goes, why? What don't you want me to see? It's not a cash register. I can be allowed to be back here. What are you hiding? And I don't know why I did it, and I don't know where this lie came from, but I looked down at the desk all ashamed, and I kind of like twiddled my fingers a bit, and I said, well, ma'am, I don't like to talk about it, but I'm severely dyslexic. If I'm not looking you in the face while you're talking, sometimes my brain has trouble processing your words in the correct order. It's very embarrassing, and I'm so sorry. And she goes, oh, well, okay. And I got my way. It was terrible. It's a terrible thing to do, but I'm not sorry. And another time, I had just clocked out for the day, and it had been a long day. I think it was a Sunday, and I was working like an 8.5-hour shift, and so I just clocked out at customer service, and I was on my way back to the break room. This woman tried to say, excuse me, I need things and stuff. And
she sounds the same as the old one.
I know, funny that. And I said, well, ma'am, if you want to go back to customer service, someone says, well, why won't you help me? And I didn't feel like, I was the kind of person I knew if I said I've already clocked out, I'd get a lecture about how I'm being lazy. So I said, oh, I want to help you, but I can't. I've already clocked out. Sorry, union rules. I can't, there's nothing I can do. Just, oh, okay, I support the unions. And she went back to customer service. So there's someone out there who really believes that there's a bookseller union.
Well, there probably should be.
There's nothing to protect us from. I mean, like...
shops.
I guess, but my company always pays very well and treats its people really well, so 2 times I lied to customers. So there you go.
Well, you're going to have to change the name of that when you move over here to One Time at the Shop.
Yeah, I will. Unless I end up working at... Well, I'll still have to... If I end up working at a bookshop, I'll still have to change it, but...
Yeah, because it'll be a bookshop rather than a bookstore. Will you find it weird to be all like, oh, it's a bookshop?
I'll adapt. But anyway, what did we watch this week?
We watched the greatest show in the galaxy, Doctor Who. What episode did we watch? I forget.
It was just so much calliope music, which already gets on my last nerve, so that was a bit grating.
So, if you missed the last couple of episodes, we've been, as a way to sort of count down to Peter Capaldi's first stories, we've been watching stories. Each week we watch a story by a different Doctor, and this week it's the 7th Doctor, so Greatest Show in the Galaxy was the choice, and this is one of the ones that I like, but most people tend to think it's middling or not very good.
It was very surreal, and was 80s-tastic. Oh, it was so 80s, from the Cyndi Lauper werewolf to the CGI. It was just, even the music was especially 80s.
And you've got the rather terrible children's level rapping.
Oh God. Well, they had a character, and I have to give props to the actor, because he either was actually American or he did a great American accent. And I was shocked. I was like, a black person in classic Who. I've never seen this before. But he unfortunately in vocal cadence and looks a bit like Barack Obama.
It is hilarious.
It's
I never noticed it until you mentioned
added level of that. But so anyway, one thing that I noticed, and before we get on to the actual episode, I wanted to ask you about. So, the trope of the evil carnival is pretty well established. I mean, I think it's a very common trope, at least in America anyway. So whenever I watch Classic Who, I always try to remember that I'm watching it from a purely American cultural standpoint. So we have our standard tropes with the evil carnival. But what this episode did, I noticed, is there was a lot of references to the people who ran it were hippies, and they're free love, and they're, wanting to be yourself and respect your emotions and all this stuff. Like, it was really derogatory towards the hippie lifestyle, but this was the mid-'80s. So the hippies are not connected in American trope with a carnival, evil or otherwise. Is that something that's true in Great Britain?
Well, we don't... Now, I could have missed stuff, but I don't think that we have particularly codified evil carnival tropes. What I think they were doing was, because British society is constantly stratified, and I think they were trying to connect the idea of people who can travel around with hippies who wanted things to be less stratified. I think that's where the connection comes in.
That's so interesting to me.
Plus, the UK... at the time, it was, we were under Thatcher, who...
Literally under Thatcher. She was standing on everyone's neck.
So there was a bit of...
Margaret Thatcher, panty snatcher.
So the country was being quite conservative at the time. And Well, interestingly, the guys who were in charge of Doctor Who at the time, they admitted that one of their things they wanted to do was sort of constantly insult and subvert Thatcherism. One of the people involved in it, it might have been Sylvester McCoy, it might have been the guy who was the producer at the time, the head writer at the time. He said that what he wanted to do with the Doctor Who, what he wanted to achieve was basically bring down the government.
Via Doctor Who.
Yeah. I was thinking big. And like another story from the same sort of era, the Happiness Patrol is a very, very obvious parody of Thatcherism.
Well, I mean, no offense, pretty much 2/3 of Doctor Who is about evil future fascists.
Yeah, the UK does have, it has an obsession with it, probably because the World War II was the last hurrah of the Empire and stuff like that. That's probably where that comes from. But my view on the Greatest Show in the Galaxy is that it's a meta story about the show itself.
Well, I got that. I mean, you had mentioned it, but it was very obvious. Literally, the only thing I was missing was Film Brain standing in the corner of my room, jumping up and down, shouting symbolism.
But maybe you wouldn't have spotted it if I hadn't brought it up beforehand.
Well, no, because it's in the captain, and I forget her name, but I'm going to keep calling her the Cyndi Lauper werewolf because, damn it, that's what she was. It was, and then with the little fresh-faced kid who's supposed to be the biggest fan and everything, it was just it was obvious.
Well, the fan, they have admitted that that was basically a parody of Doctor Who fandom at the time. But the rest of it, I looked online for anyone who's, come to the same conclusion about the story as me, and I haven't seen anything. I saw someone who interpreted it as about science fiction in general, which said the Explorer was Star Trek, the bikers were Blake Seven, and the Doctor was Doctor Who, and the gods were some kind of television thing, and that's an interesting interpretation. But my one was, just for the audience, the circus itself is classic Doctor Who. The gods of Ragnarok, who have created the circus where they're forcing people to entertain them and then be destroyed if they are not entertaining, that was either the audience or the BBC.
I think it was the BBC, just from the way it's portrayed, because he says, "Aha, the gods of Ragnarok," and this is just a spoiler warning, spoiler alert, that the Doctor really does enjoy his R's in this episode.
Yeah, that's just Sylvester McCoy's way of speaking.
Yeah, but he rolled them a lot. But so he's like, "Aha,
Ragnarok."
Yeah, I can't do that. He's like, "Aha, gods of Ragnarok, I have fought you for time and space for years and years, except it's only been mentioned just now." And that does totally fit. That the BBC, the show has always been kind of at war with the BBC uppers,
Yeah, I
think
true.
that instead of doing a Twatty Who episode about it, you should do some kind of Doctor Who analysis of it. If you're the only person that's come to this conclusion, I think you should. And you know what? You could get some cameos from other analytical people like Leon Thomas and Nash and folks.
It's possible, but to give more detail to the audience about what I'm talking about, people are forced to entertain the audience, and then if they're not entertained, they will die. Now, the circus is partly malicious, and it's also partly got people who are just forced to do this who don't want to do it, but they're being forced to do this in order to survive. And the producer of Doctor Who at the time, John Nathan Turner, he had not wanted to be involved in Doctor Who since roughly the third season of Peter Davison, but he was forced by the BBC to keep on as Doctor Who producer. The BBC would not give him another assignment. He kept requesting, please give me somewhere else, but they kept saying no. So, the ones who don't want this thing to continue, don't want it to be stuck there, forcing people to, be killed for the audience as a entertainment, that strikes me as John Nathan Turner. The malicious ones, that I'm not too sure about who that represents. But, for instance, who has been, brought in to try and entertain the audience / the BBC and then was later destroyed? Colin Baker's Doctor. He was basically the scapegoat for how the show had not done well when it was actually everyone else's problem, not his. So.
Well, the quote-unquote the audience is this one, family, a mother and father and daughter, who basically, it had to be fun for the actors involved in this to, just sit there and really, really eerily eat food. Because they're, snacking on popcorn and crisps and other sorts of things, this is very boring. Yes, it is boring. Something should happen soon. Yes, it should. Yeah. And I liked that was the kind of idea of the British viewing public.
I don't know if it was intended or not for all that interpretation. But if it was intended, then it's far better than Love and Monsters, which did the same sort of Uber parody. But Love and Monsters, A, was bad, and B, they didn't parody themselves, while they just sort of said, oh, look, fans are a bunch of sad people who congregate, to celebrate their own sadness and how they're talentless at everything.
And also a guy gets a blowjob from a concrete slab.
That's one of the least offensive things with Love and Monsters. And then this one, it's like, we are portraying ourselves as reluctant villains in this ongoing tragedy as I think something is continuing for the benefit of some people who aren't even enjoying it. It's like a really harsh indictment of where the show was psychologically.
But with that wonderful British surrealism. Well, here's a question I have. Where was this filmed?
Actually, Greatest Show almost... No, the Greatest Show almost never got finished. There were severe problems. I believe there was like asbestos or something where they usually filmed. They filmed all the outside stuff in like one of the beaches or something, or like
I was wondering because I was like, where in England is it that dry?
We do have places like that. I'm not sure where it was, but they filmed all that stuff, and then they discovered they literally could not use the shooting space for 2 weeks. So because there was a problem on the inside, which I think was asbestos, but I'm not sure. So what they had to do was, originally it was going to get shelved, but then one of the producers came up with the idea, hey, all the interiors are set in a circus tent. Why don't we build a circus tent? So they built it in the car park of of the building they would usually film in.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah, and so the show, Greatest Show and Warriors of the Deep, which was a Peter Davison, they're both stories that almost became new shadows, as in shows that were started but never finished. Now, in the case of Greatest Show, I'm glad it was finished. In the case of Warriors in the Deep, I'd rather have Shada be finished. Shada was the Fourth Doctor story that was never completed.
Well, here's the thing. I really like Ace. I like Ace because she's like, oh no, I'm in trouble and I don't know where the doctor is. I better get a weapon and sort this out. Like, she's awesome and she kicks ass. But then, this one thing I don't like about the Seventh Doctor is he's kind of a douchebag. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, Lewis, because I know he's your favorite, but he's kind of a dick. I mean, I'm just saying.
He is the... Okay, well, the 10th Doctor and the 11th Doctor, it's a much of a new Who thing, but occasionally an old Who thing, where the Doctor needs to run in and announce that he's the best thing at everything and then everyone should be impressed by him. The 7th Doctor, what I loved is that he didn't need to do that. What he did was quietly arrange so he would win and then have everything go to plan and then announce it and then when it's too late for him to be defeated. Well, it's the exact opposite of the 10th Doctor's, hello, I'm the Doctor, you should run. But the 7th Doctor's just like, I've already arranged why you should run, but I'm not going to draw attention to it. I'm that good. He's the king of not having to draw attention to how awesome he is because he's that awesome.
I guess, but I know that he's still kind of mean to Ace, so.
He is.
Not in this episode, but I know that eventually it'll happen.
He is callous, he is calculating, he is very inhuman in his emotions in the same sort of way that the 4th Doctor was, and the 6th Doctor. But it was done in a different way. I really like the chess master aspect of the 7th Doctor, where he would arrange his victory before the adventure even began.
So, you know what, we should probably synopsize this before we wrap, because it's getting on to be, we talked over long about a few things, but, so basically, a little satellite comes on to the TARDIS and says, you should totally come to the psychic circus, it's just nearby. And Ace is like, I think clowns are creepy, I don't like circuses, let's not go. The Doctor's like, oh, pshaw. So of course they go, and it's on this weird planet that looks like it's a desert. It looks like Tatooine, actually. And everyone's like, oh, go into the circus, well, only mad people and weirdos and hippies go there. And of course there's nefarious things going on, there's people trying to escape the circus because it's up to no good, because of course it is. And so they eventually meet up with their, I almost want to call the writer insert surrogates, but they're not inserts of the writer. They're basically a parody version of the Doctor and Ace, where the Doctor is the captain, this old, like, things in stock British kind of
it's
explorer.
This intergalactic explorer in a full Victorian pith helmet and everything.
Yeah. And his companion, whose name I can't remember, but who looks like Cyndi Lauper, and she's actually a werewolf.
A green werewolf.
Yes, and he treats her very inhumanely at times. And
get PETA involved.
No, PETA sucks. We hate them.
I know, but she's human though, so it's like a joke.
So then they all end up at the circus, but the thing is, when you go to the circus, as long as you're not the family that's watching the circus, then you get to be in the talent show, which is basically you entertain people, and if they're not entertained, then you die right away. But actually what's going on is they were drawn here. The circus used to be famous and actually benevolent. They were drawn there by a being, which is actually the gods of Ragnarok, who have been basically bleeding the circus performers and anyone who they can find to death. And pretty much everyone dies except the Doctor and Ace, the guy that used to run the circus, and Cyndi Lauper the werewolf.
Interestingly, the Gods of Ragnarok, in the books afterwards, it was explained that they had created the land of fiction from the Mind Robber, but they left it at some point, and that's why they needed the master of the land of fiction.
Well, at least it's tied into something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, all in all, I thought it was really good. It was very surreal, very 80s. It reminded me a lot of some surreal 80s British sci-fi that I had seen back in, like, 1983 or 84 on Nickelodeon, if you can imagine. Because that's the age that I was. But I thought it was good. I thought it was a very good episode. What did you think?
I like Greatest Show in the Galaxy. It's the Sylvester McCoy era. Okay. The Peter Davison's first season is like the height of his seasons. Then the seasons go down and down and down until the absolute nadir of Classic Who in the later years are the Colin Baker seasons. And it's not Colin Baker's fault. He's brilliant. But then over the Sylvester McCoy era, they go up again. And this was his second season. So it's getting there. The show is good again. His third season, it's one of the best seasons the show had ever had.
Well, there you go. So next week, we're going to have to watch the movie, the Paul McGann movie, right?
Yep, we're going to have to watch that. And then afterwards, we can watch one episode a season, which should bring us pretty much into, Peter Capaldi's one in time for that.
Yeah. But so anyway, it is time for his favorite part of the show. The part that we couldn't get rid of even if we tried, Giovanni's trivia question. And Giovanni, are you with us today?
Yeah, boss, here I am. So, I've got some bad news for you. So you might want to sit down. Well, your mammal straw was sitting down. Who am I kidding? But here's the thing. Nobody got the trivia question last week. A lot of people guessed Mr. Rogers, but that's just a myth. He was never in the Army, as much as people would like to believe that he was. The question from last week was, what TV talk show host is also a military-trained sniper? And the answer was Dr. Ruth Weissenhall, the sex doctor. She actually was in the Israeli army, so, she was a trained sniper. So, unfortunately, nobody is my favorite mammal this week. I know you feel bad about it, but you'll get over it. So, I got a new trivia question for you today. Now, I'm going to ask the question, and remember, the first person that tweets at the Omega, that's at the Omega Geek on Twitter, with the correct answer, no Googling, no cheating now, you'll get to be my favorite mammal. So for this week, I've got one that's hopefully a little bit easier, okay? So I'm going to ask a question. Remember, as soon as this goes up on Blip, the first person to tweet Omega, it's at the Omega Geek on Twitter, with the correct answer, no cheating now, no Google, you get to be my favorite mammal for next week. The question is, why was Piggly Wiggly, and if you're not an American, Piggly Wiggly is a chain of grocery stores in the South. Why was Piggly Wiggly named what it was?
If you don't get it right, a random one of our listeners will be shot dead.
That's not going to happen. Just stop that. Not everybody's a dictator. So, why did Piggly Wiggly get that name? First person that knows, tweets the Omega. But for this week, I am out of here. I'm going to go off and maybe barbecue something, maybe blow stuff up, because this week's the 4th of July.
Barbecue Lloyd Lobster.
No, not me. So, to my adoring radio public, I will see you all later.
I've never been to a Piggly Wiggly. What do they sell?
It's a grocery store, so they sell, groceries. Things that you would find. I've never been to one either. They're in the Deep South, so.
I figured they'd be like a restaurant or something, maybe like a barbecue place.
That'd be cool. Like Dixie Bones.
Yeah.
But that's been our show for this week, and I'm the Omega Geek, and who would you have want to have been this week?
Camaro. From Bitch Slap.
Oh, I was about to say the car. Well, there you go.